Hi all, hope you're staying safe and well. Today we're going to be looking at the last of the family collection of poems from the Love and Relationships collection, and that is Eden Rock. Once again, we're going to be using the Mitzel style, so we're going to look at the meaning, imagery, tone, structure and language of the poem. This is to supplement the notes you've done in class with your class teacher. This is one of the least popular ones in the anthology, I would suggest. It's one of the ones that people find more difficult to use and find more difficult to make connections with, but it does have some nice useful connections to do with parental relationships with the other poems that we've been considering, so it's worth having a look at and worth taking a bit of time over. So I hope this is really useful. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is we're just going to read through the poem. So we have Eden Rock by Charles Causley. They are waiting for me somewhere beyond Eden Rock. My father, 25, in the same suit of genuine Irish tweed, his terrier Jack, still 2 years old and trembling at his feet. My mother, 23, in a sprigged dress, drawn at the waist, ribbon in her straw hat, has spread the stiff white cloth over the glass. Her hair, the colour of wheat, takes on the light. She pours from a thermos the milk straight from an old HP sauce bottle, a screw of paper for a cork, slowly sets out the same 3 plates, the tin cups painted blue. The sky whitens as if lit by 3 suns. My mother shades her eyes and looks my way. Over the drifted stream, my father spins a stone along the water. Leisurely, they beckon to me from the other bank. I hear them call, "See where the stream path is. Crossing it is not as hard as you might think. I had not thought that it would be like this." Okay, the meaning of Eden Rock can be quite complex. There are multiple different ways of reading the poem and looking at it, but initially we have to get our head around what we think the poem potentially could be talking about. The poem's clearly about his relationship with his mother and father. Now, Charles Causley has quite an interesting relationship with his parents. His father died when he was just 7 years old, so he's obviously got this sort of bond with his father and memories of him, which are going to be quite significant. Now, in the poem, we have his parents as young people, so in their 20s, as young parents perhaps, laying out an idyllic picnic-style scene. Now, the narrator of the poem, we don't know whether this is the child Charles Causley or the adult Charles Causley as he is now when he's writing the poem. So it could be that the meaning of the poem is this is a memory, this is a recollection of him as a small child and his parents preparing this picnic for him. Or it could be something slightly more complicated. It could be that he's an adult narrator and he is embedded in this scene. Some people have taken this to read that this is him preparing for the afterlife. This is his the crossing of the stream is him moving from this world into the next world, and his parents who are already there are beckoning him to join to bring him over to the other side. So there's some quite interesting things going on here. The fact that we have this blurring of timelines, you first got into the word "still" as if how it was, like how things were. So I personally am tempted to go with the interpretation that this is something deeper than just a memory. It's a more significant moment in Charles Causley's life as an adult, potentially this moment where he's ready to move on to the next world. Imagery-wise, with the poem, there's some quite interesting things that Charles Causley is doing. So one of the main images that we can start to take apart and start to look at is the idea of the picnic scene, this idea of preparation, which might be something that we could consider a deeper metaphorical meaning for, like what is actually being prepared for here. If we look at the images that are actually used, we have the preparation of the stiff white cloth on the grass. We have the pouring tea from the thermos, the HP sauce bottle with a paper cork, and lots of these images that are very rustic and very idyllic, so like sort of an idealised version of this. We could talk about things like his parents' clothing, his mother with the ribbon in her straw hat, the father in the same genuine Irish tweed suit, and the small puppy at his feet. So this sort of idyllic memory of his parents and how this scene is prepared for him. We also might consider the idea of this sort of deeper mystical meaning that we were discussing at the start, where we could consider this as a journey, as a transformation, as a change. Now, in the scene, we have the parents beckoning him from the other bank. We have the crossing of the stream, see where the stream path is. That stream could represent this boundary between these two worlds and the movement between that. So that's an interesting metaphor that you might want to discuss and look at there. The fact that we've got this harsh, bright light, this sort of truer reflection of things might be considered as well. It says that the sky was white as if lit by 3 suns. Now that's obviously this sort of bright white light that we have potentially could be considered angelic, it could be considered sort of heavenly. There's lots of interesting imagery there. The fact that the father is skipping a stone leisurely along the water is an interesting image as well. Water has lots of meanings for us. It could consider like opportunities, like an endless expanse of ocean, or it's very deep, it's very sort of interesting, the sort of shapes and movements it makes. The fact that he's doing this leisurely could consider that they have all the time in the world, which again might potentially lead us to this more deeper metaphorical reading of the poem. The poem itself has a really interesting tone, one that is laced with nostalgia and memories, but also an uncertainty about the future. So, for example, we have the fact that Charles Causley is remembering his father and mother at the ages when he was a young child. So we have the father being 25, the mother 23. So this sense of memory is very, very important. The fact that it's still 2 years old, trembling at his feet with the puppy, it could be quite important because it's inferring that this is something that is long gone, this is something in the past. We also have this sense of nostalgia, this sense of like family traditions and family ways of doing things. The way the picnic is set up is using, like I said previously, very rustic, very homemade solutions. So, for example, using a paper cork in the HP sauce bottle. Also, the fact that you've got the milk is in the HP sauce bottle, it's been transferred over. So these are very specific things for his family. So it's very tonally personal and very tonally to do with memory and thinking about things that have happened in his past. We also have this deep and close bond with his parents. The fact that they are beckoning him over to the other side of the river. The fact that they are encouraging him to come towards them, could consider this parental bond being very strong, very powerful, and the fact that he's preparing to do this signifies that they're there for him, they're there to support him through this next stage, whatever that might be. It's a very peaceful scene, it's a very idyllic scene, it's not threatening and it's not violent or aggressive. So if we do take this metaphorical meaning of this being a metaphor for his death and his transfer into the next world, it's a very peaceful image and a very sort of idyllic way of doing that. And the symbolism of the picnic, this sort of beautiful countryside image is quite significant with that. Ultimately though, we have this uncertainty that the poem ends on. I had not thought that it would be like this, which is quite interesting, the fact that the poet is uncertain about these ideas and uncertain about what the future might potentially hold for him. Within the structure of the poem, we have sort of 3 distinct sections within the poem. So if we're looking at structure, we're looking at the order in which the poem is put together, and we're looking at why the poet's potentially chosen to do this. It's okay talking about it as long as we can justify why and there's reasons behind it. The first 3 stanzas are focused on the poet looking at his parents and describing in detail what they are doing, what they're wearing, the objects that are around them. It's sort of lovingly detailed, if you like, and it goes into a lot of depth about that. We could look at the specific words and phrases that he uses. The fact that his mother's hair is the colour of wheat, he notices, for example. His father's genuine Irish tweed suit, the stiff white cloth, the same plates, the tin cups, everything's like really detailed and descriptive in those 3 stanzas. The next 2 stanzas, stanza 4 and stanza 5, are about the parents calling to the poet. So at this point, they have turned their attention to him, and they're beckoning him over the river and looking how easy it is and where the crossing in the stream is, ready for him to move over. So we move from descriptions of the parents to the parents taking their attention to him. And finally, we have this open stanza at the end, this final declarative sentence that's isolated and alone, very different to the rest of the poem, where it's, I had not thought that it would be like this, where you get a personal reflection from the poet. So we've got these three distinct sections, and that shows a transformation in the poet's attitude. It might show the transition, if you like, from one world into the next, and the fact that it ends on this uncertainty is certainly one of those structural points that we could get our teeth into and start to discuss. Okay, language-wise, there are several different strands that we might want to consider. We could first of all look at the language of memory, and could look at the fact that this is a very nostalgic and very significant memory in the poet's life. So we could look at something like, for example, they're waiting for me somewhere beyond Eden Rock. We could look at the fact that his father is 25 and the mother 23. Those are certain aspects we could consider. As mentioned previously, you might want to consider the specific detail that he goes into when he's describing the picnic. So things like the pointy from the thermos, the screw of paper cork, slowly setting out the plates, the tin cups painted blue, and these precise details that he gives give a sense of that memory. We might also want to consider the use of heavenly imagery, so things like in the start of stanza 4, the sky whitens as if lit by 3 suns. The mother has to shield her eyes because the sun is that bright and that white, so we could consider that sort of heavenly imagery. Like we talked about with the imagery section, the father leisurely skimming the stone is quite an idyllic heavenly image that we might want to consider. So we could bring that in also. So we've got the use of memory, the use of heavenly imagery. We may also want to look at the idea of personal relationships and the closeness between the poet and his parents. Things like the beckoning, the use of that verb beckon. It's a call, it's an encouragement, if you like, the fact that the parents are there for him. They're calling out to him, see where the stream path is. It is not as hard as you might think. The fact that they're very direct and they're very personal in their desire for him to cross the stream, to move to the other side, if you like. The use of pronouns, obviously very, very important. The fact that it is a personal perspective, the use of that first person I throughout the poem, and they is the fact that it's put to the parents. The address that we have is the parents addressing him as you. So the use of those pronouns is something significant that you might want to consider. So overall, if I was looking at language of this poem, what I would be looking at is essentially the use of memories, how these memories are presenting Charles Causley's views and attitudes to this event, and how positive and how relaxed and idyllic those memories are. Okay, for you to have a look at, there are 2 essay questions which you're going to follow, one of which is focusing purely on Eden Rock, the other which is considering Eden Rock alongside another poem of your choice. If you would like to do these as an essay plan, or if you'd like to do it as a full essay response, or even a couple of paragraphs from an essay response, please feel free to pass them my way and I'll have a look at them for you. Like I said at the start, Eden Rock's one of the poems that people tend to avoid from the collection. I'm not really sure why. It does pair very, very nicely with poems such as Follower. It's a really good one to look at with there. And Mother Any Distance is another good one to look at, and Before You Were Mine. There are some really, really interesting connections we could make there. So have a go at it, see what you can do. And stay tuned at the end, we'll get today's film recommendation. Okay, for my film pick today, I've gone for a biopic, which is looking at a sort of hidden group in NASA who were involved very, very heavily in working out the calculations to do with space orbit and the trajectories and things that they were doing at Hidden Figures. It's a really, really great film looking at these African American women in NASA and how they were treated very differently until certain groups of people, certain individuals made stands against the discrimination and racism that they found there. It's a fantastic feel-good film. It's got some amazing sequences in it. I would heartily recommend it, so check it out. Next time, I think we're going to move on to start to look at some of the relationships poems, but I'm also going to be looking at some Romeo and Juliet stuff as well. I'll be keeping adding them as much as I can, ideally at least one a day. So until next time, stay safe